Hello friends, thank you for joining us for STEM for our 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders. This is Miss Kristen from the Grafton Public Library, and this week we are going to be growing our very own crystals. So for this experiment, you're going to need a liquid measuring cup. You're going to also need some mason jars or other heavy-duty glass jars that can withstand hot temperatures. You're going to need pipe cleaners. The fuzzier the better for this experiment, but if you don't have any super fuzzy ones, that's okay. The skinny ones work just as well. You're going to need some pencils, some thread, scissors, a pot or pan that can go on the stove. Again, with this experiment, because we are going to be using the stove, please ask a grown-up for help. And you are also going to need our special ingredient, borax, which is actually a cleaning solution, and this is what is going to work to help us grow our crystals together. So you might be wondering, how are we going to use a cleaning solution to create crystals? Well, today you get to become a real-life scientist, and the scientist that you're going to be today is called a chemist. Chemists constantly create different reactions to try to change the makeup of the things that they're mixing together to make something new. So when we mix the borax with water and heat it up, it's going to create a new solution. This solution is going to create something called recrystallization. This is when a saturated solution or something that's really heavy and full of something cools down to form crystals from a mixture. In the case of borax, the compound, or borax, is dissolved in hot water. That's why we need to ask a grown-up for help with this. As with most minerals and solids, borax becomes less soluble the lower the temperature of the water. So when the mixture with the borax and the water is cooled down, the water can hold less of the borax. That means it's less soluble. And the borax actually falls out of the solution. This causes crystals to form at the bottom of the solution, and that makes your beautiful creations. So one other ingredient that you're going to need is food coloring. Now it's up to you. You can use whatever color food coloring you want. You can mix colors together. If you want to mix red and blue to make purple, you can do any combination of colors that you want to make your crystals, but you do need liquid food coloring. So the first step is going to be to take your pipe cleaner and mold it into whatever shape that you'd like. You could make a star, you can make a heart. If you want it to look like a real rock geode, you can just kind of twist and twirl it around itself. You do want to leave a little bit of space for the crystals to form, but if you just kind of keep twisting and wrapping, eventually it'll end up looking like this, kind of like a little flower almost. And then the crystals will be able to form right on top where all those chenille pieces are on your pipe cleaner. So what you need to do is you're going to need to bring 6 cups of water to a boil. So I already have 4 cups of water in here. And then I use my liquid measuring cup to measure out an additional 2 cups of water. So I'm going to add that to my pot. And if you want to make crystals that are a certain color, now is the time to add in your food coloring. If you decide not to add in food coloring or you don't have food coloring, you can still do this experiment. Your crystals will just be white or clear, so they'll pretty much take on whatever color your pipe cleaner is. But if you want to mix colors and add a different layer of colors to your pipe cleaner, now is the time that you would add your food coloring. So I want to make purple to go with my purple pipe cleaners over here. So I'm going to add in 3 drops of red. And then I'm going to add in 3 drops of blue. And then you can just mix it up with a spoon or whatever you have handy and make sure it's a color that you like. So I'm gonna mix this up, and that's a pretty vivid purple. I think I like that color. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm just gonna bring this over to my stove, and you're going to put this on your stove until it is a rolling boil. Please ask for permission from a grown-up or help from a grown-up to complete this step of the process. While you are waiting for your mixture to boil, you can take a jar and a pencil, and what you're going to need to do is tie a string around the middle of your pencil, because this is how you're going to suspend your pipe cleaner in the jar overnight for your borax crystals to grow. So again, I just have some thread. You can use a piece of string, whatever you happen to have at home. and I'm just gonna tie right in the middle of my pencil, and then I'm gonna make sure the string is long enough to go into the bottom of my jar, which it definitely is. And I'm going to tie the other end of the string around my pipe cleaner shape. Okay, when you put your pipe cleaner shape into your jar, you want to make sure that it's not touching the sides or the bottom of your jar, that it's free floating, because if it is touching the sides or the bottom of your jar, what's going to happen is those crystals are going to grow into whatever crystals happen to grow on the side or bottom of your jar, and then your crystal shape is going to get stuck there. And we don't want that to happen, so we want to make sure that it's floating right in the middle of the jar. So I'm going to put it in, and as you can see, my string's too long. So you can just adjust as needed. So I'm going to cut my string, make it a little bit shorter until it's able to freely float within my jar. So one tip I have before you start putting your pieces into your jars is I use 6 cups of water, because that's what's going to fill up the size of these jars as high as I would like them. If you're using smaller jars or a different shaped jar, you might want to try measuring water into the jars first to figure out how much water you're actually going to need in order to make the water go up high enough in your container for the crystals to grow. So again, when I use these jars, I figured out I needed 3 cups inside each jar in order to make it high enough to cover the crystal. If you're using a different jar, measure it out first. I'm going to give you the conversion for how much borax you should use for how many cups of water, so you can alter it to fit your needs. But that is one tip I wanted to give you guys before you move forward. All right, friends, what we're going to do now is add the borax to our boiling water solution. So you want to make sure that your boiling water and food coloring, if you decided to add it, is at a rapidly rolling boil. That means you can see lots of bubbles and they're moving really, really fast. So I'm going to pull mine off of the stove. Okay, and again, this is a step, ask a grown-up for help. You can see the steam. And then you're going to add in 4 tablespoons of borax for every 1 cup of water you have in here. So because I have 6 cups of water, I'm going to add in 24 tablespoons of borax. It doesn't have to be exact. It's okay if it's a little under or a little over. Okay, just try to make it as close as you can. And once you add in the total amount, you're going to mix it up well. So I've added in my 24 tablespoons of borax solution, and now I'm just going to stir it until all the borax has dissolved. Remember, we want to saturate the solution, so we want the hot water to absorb all of that borax. So you might have to stir it around for a little bit. Some does get stuck on the bottom, but the hot water will allow it to absorb. Please be careful, since this water is super duper hot. And just keep stirring and stirring and stirring until you can't feel any more borax in your pot of hot water. So once your borax has completely dissolved into your pot, you're going to very carefully pour your liquid mixture into your jars. Okay, you can separate it out into 2, and that way you'll be able to put your crystal mixture into it after it's done being filled. So I've got some in there. Again, I'm going to try to make sure they're about as even as possible. That looks pretty good. And then once you're done that, you're going to put your crystal making pipe cleaner right inside. All right, so please be very careful. Again, I'm not sure if you can see all the steam coming out of these. These jars are incredibly hot. So once they're here, you should leave them there for a little while until they cool down. You're gonna stick your pipe cleaner design right inside the jar, drop it in. It will slowly start to sink, and your pencil will hold it. Again, you wanna make sure that it's floating and that's not touching any sides or the bottom. And just stick it in there. And then what you're gonna do is you're gonna actually let these sit for 8 hours or overnight, and then we'll see what happens. All right, friends, so it's been 24 hours and I'm ready to take my crystals out of the jar. I just let them sit overnight. I did end up sticking like a magazine over the top just to kind of keep the heat in for a little bit longer. The longer that the liquid stays hot and cools slowly, that helps the process of creating the crystals so you get bigger crystals. So here we go, I'm gonna pull this one out. And look at how huge my crystal is. So it looks like a geode, like one of the rocks that you might find. And so all you have to do is snip with scissors, the string here, and then it'll end up, I already took the other one out, it'll look like this. So you can just let it dry, it's super sparkly. They are delicate, so please be careful with them if you drop it, which we have done. The crystals will just kind of go everywhere. But if you want to seal your geode or crystal, all you have to do is spray it with a clear acrylic spray, or you can just leave it. We've had some that have lasted quite a long time, just leaving it like this. But you do want to make sure that it dries. But you can just see all the light catching it, super sparkly. And I just wanted to give you a little bit more information about crystals. So it's really, really neat when you think about this. So the solution that we made was saturated or filled with the borax. And then as the solution started to cool, the molecules in the water start to move closer together again. There's less room for the solution to hold on to the dissolved borax. So the crystals begin to form and build on one another on the pipe cleaner as the water lets go of the excess borax and evaporates. And this is the same principle that applies to snowflakes. As water cools, the molecules move closer together. But since all the water molecules are shaped the same, because they're all made from H2O or water, they align in a six-sided crystal, and that's how we get snowflakes. So we can apply some of the same science to our borax crystals that we find in snowflakes. I hope you guys had fun learning about borax crystals with me, and I'll see you next week.